why that care was limited, why it did not extend to Palestinian women. There is nothing more selfish and self-absorbed than white woman feminism.
I can actually answer this question for you, and there's a word specifically for this issue, and it's called femonationalism. Hi, my name is Evan. I'm a bioethicist, and I specialize in misinformation, disinformation, and conspiracy theories as a threat to public health. So the term femonationalism was coined by Sarah R. Ferris, who's a sociologist, and I believe she works at the University College of London, but she's actually Italian, and she came up with the term to describe feminism in far-right or extreme alt-right, far-right movements, political movements specifically. So that is people who use feminist language to describe themselves, particularly women, but championed things that were antithetical to the concepts of feminism, at least how they are promoted. Now, amazingly, femonationalism is actually an ode to a Palestinian scholar, we're back to Jasbir Puar, my favorite, who came up with homonationalism. That kind of involves things like pinkwashing, like using this idea of championing LGBTQ rights as reasoning to destroy whole communities, especially brown communities that don't agree or are painted as not being inclusive. Sarah Ferris borrows from this concept of homonationalism and says that same is true for feminism or feminist movements politically, especially in white feminist spaces. So the reason that what's happening in Gaza, particularly to the women, is not getting Barbie girl energy is because that population, especially because it skews to Islam and is brown, does not mirror or does not embody the type of feminism and the feminist points or doctrines that Barbie girl energy does. So white, Western, neoliberal feminism requires that all people, to get support from it, have to ascribe to homogeny, right? And I think that this creator using the example of Barbie is so apt because for those of us who saw Barbie, one of the things that we saw is we saw all different types of people represented, but they all lived the same way. They all lived in Barbie land. They all lived in pink playhouses, right? There was a lot of similarity. They weren't inherently different. They were wearing different outfits and they were different colors, but their world was homogenous. But the world with which all of this is happening in, especially in the Middle East, is an exotic and non-Western place. And the teachings, the underpinnings of this type of feminism is that the people of this place are naturally to be seen and perceived as barbaric, particularly the men. And so that any women ascribing to, protecting, or standing alongside the men are just considered enablers and participants, and therefore undeserving of Barbie girl feminism. Now, the way to acquire this particular group of feminist support is to ostensibly completely relinquish culture and religion and denounce the men of that community and culture as barbaric, and that your interest is to escape that space. If you were to deeply ascribe to and embody Western feminism and Western culture by proxy, then you would get that kind of support. Think of folks like Ayaan Hirsi Ali, who was able to, she tells a very brutal story about her experience with Islam, but she entirely aligns with this conceptualization of to demonize that entire region and that entire community or anybody who ascribes particularly to, her whole focus is Islam. So no, this particular brand of feminism is not moved by what's happening because they still see women who are hijabbed, particularly, or had their heads covered, who are standing by and still participating in this community and this culture with deep reverence and attachment, as they should, because it's their community, their culture, and their religion. But it's not Barbie girl, And again, we see the same thing in LGBTQ rights movements, especially very whitewashed ones or very white-centric ones, to basically be comfortable with and promote demonization of populations that are painted to be non-inclusive. So as long as you're able to say, oh, hey, this community, this populace, this region, this race, this culture, this religion does not treat or does not ascribe to or does not think about this other group, this marginalized group, the same way we do, and give them all the same rights and include them or believe in them or support them in the same exact ways, therefore they cannot be human, they're barbaric, and their destruction is for the betterment of the rest of us. And this form of feminism has that same conceptualization underneath it or throughout it, but for women. And this kind of feminism doesn't just say who gets to be human and not human. It also does a very weird thing where it also says like who gets to be a woman, who doesn't get to be a woman, right? Because who's deserving of feminism and who's not, because feminism only looks this way. And if you don't ascribe to it being this way, or if you don't look the way that we require feminism to look, then you're not a feminist and you're helping evil and you're collateral. This makes non-Western women collateral damage simply by being attached to their culture and community. It also creates weird rules for feminism. I know that like Sarah Ferris goes into more in-depth things like the misrepresentation of things like reproductive rights and access, and how it can, like, this type of feminism, feminationalism, is also used in a really strange way in like conservative spaces to promote like tribalism and like patriotism that again becomes very homogenous, right? You have to ascribe to this. Like if you do not perform your feminism in this exact way, you are not feminist. You are not deserving of feminist rights or women's rights, and therefore you're working actively against it, and you should be destroyed. And I'm willing to destroy you, and I'm willing to support the destruction of you. When we talk about supporting human rights, particularly for the most marginalized and for those that are experiencing the most oppression globally, we have to get comfortable with supporting the rights of people that may or may not support similar groupings of rights that we support, right? Like I am a queer trans person. I do not know what this creator that I have stitched and attached here believes about my identity, and honestly I don't care, because I do not think that the community that she comes from and the community that she's worried about and the community that is currently experiencing enormous violence at the hands of a like homicidal state, I do not think any of that should be occurring, and I actively want that to stop, and I actively want that dismantled, regardless of whether or not I'm like welcome into the community, because they're humans, and humans living in their own ancestral lands, and the only thing that they want in this scenario is to live safely in their own ancestral lands without being threatened with annihilation, doesn't involve me. It's not about me. See what I'm saying? That's Barbie girl. Because like Barbie land shouldn't just be for like Barbies and Kens. Like blow it out further and think about like any action figure is a doll and should be allowed to live in a world and be seen as a doll. Yeah? Regardless of what like the Barbies think. That's it.